Hey, what's up, guys? It's Chuck from MotionApprentice.com again. I told you I'd be hopping back into After Effects for a tutorial this week, and that's what I'm doing. I wanted to show you how I use the After Effects plugin Animation Composer to quickly create, background animations and object buildups and stuff like that I do in the kind of explainer videos that I animate all the time. Animation Composer is a free plugin, and then you can buy all kinds of add-on packs for it to give you more options for the animations that you make. So again, I just want to show you how I do this real quick. It's not going to be the greatest example in the world, but it's going to, I think, show you how the tool works and give you an idea of how you can use it. So I'm going to start off here. I actually just drew this quick little simple building illustration in Affinity Designer. I prefer to do vector art in Affinity just because it's much simpler and easier for me to wrap my head around than Illustrator. But the problem is After Effects doesn't import layered Affinity files natively. So you kind of have to do a round trip and get them into Illustrator and break them apart and then import them into After Effects from there. So I drew this in Affinity, and then the way I do this is I saved it out as an SVG file, and that imports pretty much perfectly into Illustrator, and then in Illustrator you can break it apart into the different layers that you need to, and there's several ways to do that. You can, if you have an object all grouped up, you can go to this release to layers sequence here, and that'll separate all the objects automatically, or you can just kind of drag them apart onto different layers yourself. So because this is a quick example, I'm not going to go in and name all these layers. Maybe I'll actually, now that I think about it, I'm just going to rename a few of them. The windows I'm not going to rename because there's a ton of them, and this is just going to be real quick. But so we got the door and the door handle. Just call that door handle 2. This is awning main, and we'll call this one awning front. So you can see how I have this broken up. These are all just on different layers, and you can hide them. And that's so that when we get into After Effects, we can animate them separately. Then the rest of these are windows. And why don't we, these are the 2 windows that are down by the door. So I'm just going to drag those up, and we might as well just rename those window left. And we'll rename this one window right. And the rest of these are the main windows. And a lot of times, in order to make this easier on myself, what I like to do is kind of think about the order that this stuff is going to animate in, and kind of just drag it around and make sure it's in that order, in Illustrator. That way I don't have to do it in After Effects. So I'm going to do that here real quick, and maybe I'll fast forward this so you don't have to watch it, but give me a second to just drag these out in order. So you'll see here that what I start to do is I hide the layers that I have already in the correct order, and that just allows me to keep my place so I know what layers I still have to reorder down at the bottom there. And then when we're done, I'll unhide everything. Okay, so I have those all dragged out in order, and the reason I did them in that order is because I kind of want these windows to build on screen from left to right, from the top row down, okay? And then maybe we're going to experiment a little bit, but maybe we'll build the windows first, and then we'll build the awning, and then we'll do the left window, and then the door the door handles, and then the right window. So this isn't, you can reorder all this stuff in After Effects if you want. I just like to have it done in Illustrator because it speeds things up a little bit for me in After Effects. So I'm going to go ahead and save this out, and we'll just call this building AI because this is going to be the Illustrator file. Okay, now in After Effects, we just want to import that file. I just have a HD 5-second composition set up here, and all we want to do is import this building file, and we want to make sure to import it as a composition, and then I like to retain all layer sizes. So you do that, click import, and that gives you this building composition. And you know, we could animate it in here if we want to. So the way that Animation Composer works is you have all of these presets kind of in these drop down menus here, and you can easily add animation presets to the objects in your scene. So for instance, we're going to go to layer transformations, 2D layer transformations, and I have stars next to a bunch of the ones that I like, but we're just going to pick any one of them here. And you can see it gives you a little preview animation of how that animation is going to work. Okay, so let's take, this is the main building down here. I forgot to rename it, but let's take that one as an example, and we're going to solo it. And I'm going to show you how Animation Composer works. So in order to apply one of these presets, and by the way, if you click the twirl down next to the preset, you can change the direction from which this animation comes in, right? So you see how that works. So let's say we want this building to animate up from the bottom, okay? All we have to do is drag that preset and drop it into the in transition here, which is the little window on the left. And you can see that we get this marker on the layer down at the bottom. I'm going to raise this up to the top so you can see it a little better, and I'm going to recolor it green. So you can see that we get this marker here, and that indicates the end of the transition. So it's going to move up into the composition over that period of time, right? And if you go to the effects controls for that layer, you have options for how this animation is applied. So for instance, this endpoint has you know, a offset of about 1,890 pixels on the Y. So it starts, if we zoom out, starts way down there. If you want the animation to start closer to the actual composition, all you have to do is just drag this up. Okay, and there you go. So you have that animation there. And you can also obviously apply this to the out transition as well. So let's say we want it to come into frame on the bottom and then move out at the top. Well, we can do that, and we have the same control under effects controls. We can adjust the offset for where that layer winds up. Okay, so you can see how that works. So you can do the in transition and the out transition, and it's just an easy drag and drop. And then these markers you can drag around to adjust how long that animation takes. Okay, so you can see that this is an example where, you know, this might not have saved me a lot of time. I'm just animating one position, right? It's something that would have been easy enough to do with keyframes, and I could adjust, have a little more control over the easing with my motion 2 panel over here or in the speed graph. But where this really shines is when you have like a ton of objects to animate, and you don't want to go in and copy and paste keyframes and animate each one of them individually. You want to kind of apply animation presets quickly. And we can do that. I can show you how that works now. First of all, we can remove these presets that I just added. So all we do is select the layer, go over and remove all presets. So that layer is back to normal now. And we're going to drag that back to the bottom of the composition. Okay, and let's say we want to animate this building kind of scaling on screen with kind of a bouncy scale. So you can see that we have a ton of options of different animation presets, and I'm not going to go through them all, but we have everything from fades to positions, which I just showed you, position and rotation you can do, and all of these, again, you can choose the direction and that kind of stuff that you're animating from. So let's say that we want this building to scale and have kind of a bouncy scale. So we can scale up. Let's say that we want to scale up just on the y-axis, and we want it to overshoot a little bit. So we're going to go down. I'm going to bring this out a little bit. So we're going to go down and we're going to choose one of these overshoot presets down here. And I can drag that right onto the in transition window, and you'll see that we have that animation applied right to the object. So let's say that that's great. That's exactly what I want for that building, but I want it to animate from the bottom. Well, this just uses the normal After Effects anchor point, so you can just drag that anchor point down to the bottom, and now you'll see that the building animates from that anchor point at the bottom. Okay, so that's how easy Animation Composer is to use, and I'm actually going to drag out the length of that transition a little bit. And we have that nice little animation of the building kind of bouncing into frame there, scaling into frame. So this isn't much different from the previous example that I showed you, but now let's start to figure out how we can apply this to all of these presets here and get a quick animation going, right? So first thing I'm going to do is we want all of these windows and stuff to follow the animation of the building. So I'm going to go ahead and just parent with the pick whip all the other layers to the building. And now you can see that they all follow the building. So that's pretty nice animation in and of itself, but we can make this much more complex really quickly. So all of these window layers here, I'm going to grab all of those, and I'm going to find another preset here in Animation Composer. So I'm going to go to scale from anchor point proportionally, so it scales in the X and Y axis at the same time. And I'm going to find another overshoot one. So we'll go to overshoot 2 here because it's got a couple bounces. And with all of those layers selected, I'm just going to drag that into the in transition. Now I'm going to offset these layers a little bit and drag them over here, so you can see that after the building kind of comes into frame, they start to scale up. Okay, so you see how all those windows now have that preset applied. Now let's go to the awning, and we're going to do the same thing here. I want this awning to kind of extend downward, so I'm going to move the anchor point on that awning up, and we're going to use a similar animation to what we used on the building. And in fact, why don't we use the same one? So I'm going to select the building layer down there, and you can see that you can actually copy the transitions from one layer and paste them to another. So I'm going to copy it doesn't matter because there's only one, so I'll just copy all of them. And we want to go to the awning main, and we can paste that transition there. Okay, so if I drag this over, you'll see that the awning extends down like that, right? And we want the main part of the awning to actually follow, or I'm sorry, we want the front part of the awning to follow the main part. So now you'll see that the awning extends down and that front part follows it, okay? So we have our awning animation built. And for these windows down here, since they're a little wider, maybe it'll be interesting to add a little variation and just scale them up on the X. So we'll scale disproportionately on the X, and we'll add a little overshoot as well. And we can grab both of those windows and drag that transition onto them. So now those two windows both scale up on the x-axis, okay? And I'm not paying too much attention to where these reside in time yet, where the layers kind of start to transition, because we're going to stagger them in a little bit. Okay, so the door, let's go ahead and move the anchor point, and I'm going to scale up from the bottom. And instead of dragging the anchor point this time, I'm going to use my handy little Motion 2 script here from Matt Jilka at Mount MoGraph, and I'm just going to move that anchor point down to the bottom. And for this one, I guess let's go ahead and we'll copy from that building layer, and we'll do another scale on the x-axis from the bottom, okay? So you can see how that layer scales up like that. And we actually want these door handles, instead of being parented to the building, we want them parented to the door layer. And we're going to add a quick, let's just do a proportional scale to those door handles as well, and we'll do an overshoot just because that's what we've been using for this whole animation. So, you know, they have scale presets here that don't have any overshoot. They have bounce, or they ease in, or whatever. But since we're using overshoot on all of this, and we want it to kind of look bouncy and, you know, kind of fun, I'm just using overshoot for all of the elements. Okay, so let's go ahead and preview this and see what we're looking at here. So that's already a pretty cool animation, but we can add a little more variation to it by staggering these layers. And in order to stagger these layers, the Animation Composer plugin actually comes with a really cool extra utility, which is the transition shifter. Now this is really cool because it has a whole bunch of functionality. You can take all of these, let's say all of these window layers kind of pop into frame too quickly or too slow or whatever. We can take this tool, and we can go down here and select in transition markers, and we can move those around. So we can adjust multiple layer transition lengths at one time, instead of going in and individually dragging all of those markers around. And we can use that so we can drag the whole in point plus the marker around on all of those, which comes in really handy when you have out transitions as well. You can go to this middle section here, and you can do the same thing. You can use the in transition starts, so the in points or the markers, and you can align them to wherever the playhead is. So I could put the playhead here, and with all of those layers selected, I could, let's say we want to align all the in markers, which determine how fast the transition is, to the playhead there, and they're all right there. So there's a lot of functionality in here to kind of easily adjust how a lot of layers work. And one of the other pieces of functionality, and what we're going to use here, is that we can stagger all of these layers. So we can stagger the whole in transition, or we can just stagger the markers if we want. And we can do it in an ascending or descending order, or even a random order as well. You'll see here, if we want these layers to build from left to right, top to bottom, and we already had them ordered in Illustrator, what we want to do is we want to stagger these in a descending order. So we selected all the windows there, stagger them in a descending order, and we'll do it for now by 1 frame. So that offsets each layer by 1 frame in a descending order, and you can see how quickly that works there. So all of those window layers were staggered by 1 frame in a descending order, okay? And I'm going to do the same thing with all of these layers. We'll stagger those by 1 frame. And let's just grab all of these layers, and we're going to bring them back just a little bit, and we're going to preview this animation. So you can see how we built a pretty complex animation, and this took me a little while because I was explaining everything, but really this would have taken me a minute to do if I wasn't explaining everything. So you can see how Animation Composer really can speed up your workflow there. So just to show you guys how quickly you can do this without actually explaining the whole process, I'm going to run through an animation here real quick of building out this character. I just didn't want to do another building, which is the only reason I'm doing a character here. But so let's go ahead. I have him already broken up in Illustrator, and now I already saved the file. So now I'm just going to open it up in After Effects and build out a quick animation. So character AI, composition, retain layer size. All right, so let's see here. I have the hands, and I want to attach those to the arms, which are at the bottom here. The shoes I want to attach to the legs, and the legs I want to attach to the hips. The shirt can also be attached to the hips, neck hole to the shirt, neck to the neck hole, head to the neck. All of the hair objects and the eyes and the cheeks and the nose, mouth, all that stuff can be attached to the head. All right, so let's build this guy out by, first I'm going to change the anchor points so this all scales from where I want to. And in this version, I think I'll use some scaling with rotation as well, just for something a little bit different. Okay, I think all the anchor points are pretty much set up where I want. So start with the hips. I'm going to use my favorites here. And I forgot to attach the arms to the shirt. Okay. I'm going to do a scale with a rotate on the legs. And I think I'll do the same thing with the arms as well. Then on the neck, I'm just going to go with a regular proportional scale on the neck hole anyway. On the neck, I'll do the same thing, and on the head, I'll do the same thing. And in fact, on all of this stuff that's attached to the head, I'm going to do something similar. So the order that I want them to build out in is the hips first. You know what, I'm going to add actually some scaling to the shoes too. So we'll do the hips first, and then the legs and the arms will be after that. And then the hands and the shoes will come after the legs and the arms. And then we're going to grab all the stuff from the neck hole up and we're going to stagger it ascending. Let's try one frame first and see how that works. Okay, now for the limbs, I just really kind of want them to rotate out from opposite directions. So the angle here is -70 on that leg. I'm going to put it up to +70. And I think I probably want to do the same thing here. And let's preview the animation that we have. Pretty cool. So the hands, I actually didn't put any animation on those. So I'm going to do a rotate scale on those as well. And just make sure I change the rotation degrees on that right hand one. Let's preview it. Cool. So I would actually mess around with this timing a little bit more if this were an actual thing, and probably mess around with the transitions a little bit more. But I think that's a pretty cool little animation, and as you can see, it just took me, a few minutes. And let's say that I want to zoom in on that head, because his face is really going to be the focal point of this animation. And we want that zoom to definitely start later in the animation. So there you have it. We have a pretty cool dynamic little animation there that was built in just a couple minutes. If I was doing that with keyframes, probably would have taken a lot longer than that. So that's kind of the power of Animation Composer. And you can find Animation Composer for free at mrhorse.tv. I'll put a link in the description here. And like I said, the plugin is actually free itself. And then you can buy all kinds of packs for different animations, like motion presets. There's even lower thirds, typography. I haven't even looked at that. Scene transitions, all kinds of stuff here that you can buy as add-on packs for Animation Composer. So that's the basics of Animation Composer and how I use it to kind of speed up my workflow. I hope that was interesting to you, and I hope that despite how long-winded I can be, this really showed you how quickly you can create complex animations in After Effects using that plugin. All right, guys, until next week, I hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you later. Thanks. Bye.